What are you doing, Vanessa?
I'm looking at the results of a lab that I did. I'm looking to see the effects of environmental conditions on population growth.
So, what did you do?
Well, I used yeast cells in different environmental conditions. One was in the cold, one had more food, and one was in an acidic environment with a pH of 3.
What about a control?
Well, I grew some more yeast in another test tube with 1 milliliter glucose solution and a pH of 7.
So, you set up all the test tubes the same, except for the variables you were testing.
That's right. And then I filled them up with distilled water. I put the cold one in the fridge and kept the others at room temperature.
Then what was your hypothesis?
Well, what do you think? I had 3 different environmental conditions. One was cold, a greater supply of food, and an acidic condition.
Well, if the yeast had a greater supply of food, it means it'd have a greater supply of energy.
So there should be more in that test tube than in the control.
And cold would slow down their metabolism, so there'd be less yeast produced in the fridge.
And then there was that acidic environment with a pH of 3.
Well, things generally don't grow well in acid, so I'd guess there wouldn't be much growth there. And what did you measure and record?
Oh, it was really neat. I used the spectrophotometer.
A
what?
A spectrophotometer. It's used to measure the amount of light that passes through a solution in a test tube. The greater the amount of yeast that's growing, the less light will pass through. I recorded the results every 15 minutes and compared them with the standard. And that's what we have here.
So were we right?
Well, it looks that way. The third line down represents the control tube, the amount of light passing through versus time. Now remember, the less light, the more organisms there are.
What's the bottom line?
That's the yeast with the increased food. Everything else being equal, the more food, then the greater the number of organisms.
Then the top 2 lines must represent the acidic environment and the cold. Which one grew less?
The top one. The acid affects enzyme activity in the cells. There was little change in the number of organisms at all. In the cold environment, you could see that there was some growth, but not as much as the control.
So what does it mean? How does this apply to what we've learned?
Well, different reasons could account for a decline or stoppage in population growth. Something could be affecting the food supply.
Acid rain could do it.
Or it could be due to a cold year, disease, predation, or hunting.